Get out of Texas. With just 5 words, JD Vance detonated a firestorm before millions watching live. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She fired back. What did she say that sent JD Vance into a fury? Dawn broke over Washington, the city already humming. Today's high-profile immigration hearing was about to begin. At its center, Jasmine Crockett, a name about to be known nationwide. In her brick townhouse near the Capitol, Jasmine gripped a chipped coffee mug, eyes drifting to a photo of her grandmother at the Selma March. The same steel now in Jasmine's gaze. She remembered her early days as a public defender, the not guilty verdict for a wrongfully accused teen, his mother collapsing into her arms. From then, her mission was clear: defend the voiceless. But today felt different. The stakes weren't just one life, they were millions. Across town, JD Vance was preparing too, sharpening his words like blades. Neither of them knew it yet, but the collision course they were on would leave the country talking for years. While Jasmine gathered her thoughts over coffee, a black SUV slid up to the steps of Capitol Hill. JD Vance stepped out first, flanked by aides in dark suits, his posture straight, chin lifted just enough to suggest he'd already decided how the day would end. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts, reporters shouting his name like they were chasing a celebrity. They peppered him with questions: his stance on immigration, his push for tighter voting laws, whether he expected fireworks today. JD didn't break stride. He gave them the kind of crisp, made-for-TV lines that played perfectly to his base. Protect our borders, protect our elections, protect our way of life. Each phrase short, sharp, and rehearsed. Inside the marble halls, the noise faded to a quieter, more dangerous hum. As he walked, one aide leaned in, asking how aggressive he planned to be with Crockett. JD slowed just enough to flash a thin, knowing smile. "I'll put her in her place," he said, voice low but dripping with confidence. The aide smirked, certain his boss had the upper hand. But down the hall, the hearing room was already filling with journalists, activists, and veterans. Many there to see Jasmine. So 2 worlds were moving toward the same collision point, and neither was slowing down, and JD Vance had no idea. Her answer would haunt him for the rest of his career. By the time JD Vance reached the chamber, the hearing room was already alive with quiet tension. Senators claimed their spots behind the long mahogany desk, shuffling papers they probably wouldn't read. Every seat in the public gallery was taken. Journalists, activists, military veterans in pressed uniforms, all waiting for the first spark. Linda McCarthy, NBC's battle-tested political correspondent, stood near the press box, adjusting her earpiece. She didn't just cover stories. She smelled them before they broke. Her camera crew moved with precision, lenses trained on the empty witness chair where Jasmine Crockett would soon sit. In the second row, Reverend Elijah Brown from Dallas leaned toward the woman beside him. His voice was low but carried a weight that made her lean closer. "She's got fire," he murmured, eyes fixed on the door. But today, she'll need more than fire." The room felt like a courtroom before a verdict, the kind of silence that hums just under the skin. Every cough echoed, every footstep turned heads. Somewhere beyond those closed double doors, Jasmine was making her way here. Tomorrow's headlines would fade, but what was about to happen here could burn into America's memory forever. The gavel cracked once, sharp enough to slice through the murmurs in the room. JD Vance leaned forward, microphone angled just so, his voice warm but laced with something sharper. He spoke about Texas pride, protecting our values, and then, almost casually, questioned the loyalty of certain lawmakers to the state they claimed to serve. The words hung in the air, polite on the surface but heavy with accusation. A few of his allies on the panel smirked, as if they knew exactly who he meant. Cameras panned to Jasmine Crockett, sitting upright, hands folded neatly, her face giving nothing away. When it was her turn, she didn't take the bait. Her voice was steady, measured, but there was steel in it. She countered his insinuations with numbers, facts, and the faces behind them. A rancher who lost his land to unfair seizure, a veteran who'd been denied benefits, a nurse who worked double shifts during the pandemic. She wasn't speaking to Vance. She was speaking to everyone watching, inside and outside that room. Up in the gallery, a row of veterans shifted in their seats. One man, his chest heavy with medals, gave a slow, deliberate nod. Another leaned forward, elbows on knees as if leaning into her words. For a moment, it felt like Jasmine had pulled the air to her side of the room. But calm was not what Vance had in mind. Jasmine was mid-sentence, laying out another hard fact, when JD Vance suddenly leaned in. He didn't wait for her to finish. His voice cut through hers like a blade. "Get out of Texas!" The words landed with the thud of a gavel. Gasps rippled across the chamber, sharp and unfiltered. Even the senators who tried to hide their reactions couldn't stop their eyes from flicking toward her. Cameras reacted instantly, zooming in to capture every detail of Jasmine's face. No blink, no flinch. Just a stillness that said she'd been here before. Under fire, in the heat, and never once backing down. 5 seconds passed. Long, deliberate, suffocating seconds. In live television, that's an eternity. The kind of silence that makes everyone lean closer to their screens, wondering if they're about to see history happen. In living rooms, in airport lounges, in bars across the country, people were already reaching for their phones. Tweets flew in every direction. "Did you hear that? He just told her to leave Texas? This is gonna blow up." And it was. The clip was already climbing toward viral speed. She took in the room, the smug look on Vance's face, the veterans in the gallery, the journalists with pens frozen mid-word. And in that pause, Jasmine made her choice. In those 5 seconds, she decided exactly how she would end him. The silence still hung heavy when Jasmine's mind reached back decades. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice, steady, unshaken, telling her, "When they try to strip your dignity, don't give them the satisfaction." That voice had carried her through law school, through hostile courtrooms, through nights when the fight felt endless. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, first to the veterans in the gallery, their uniforms a living reminder of sacrifice, then to the activists, leaning forward in their seats, hands clenched tight in silent solidarity. Finally to the young staffers, some barely out of college, watching her like she was the only one who could prove this place still meant something. She leaned toward the microphone, her gaze locked on JD Vance. Her voice was calm but charged, every syllable deliberate. "Before I respond, let me show you the Texans you're trying to erase." The words rolled through the chamber like the first low rumble of a coming storm. Up in the press box, Linda McCarthy scribbled something in her notebook, then underlined it twice. Down in the gallery, Reverend Elijah Brown closed his eyes as if bracing for what was about to follow. Even Vance's smirk faltered for just a heartbeat. The air was shifting, the room tilting toward her, and everyone could feel it. But could one woman's words really change the course of this debate? Jasmine didn't take her eyes off Vance. "Mr. Chairman, I'll need the projector," she said, her tone even but unyielding. A staffer froze for half a beat, glancing toward the dais for approval, then hurried to the corner, wheeling the machine forward. The faint whir of the projector filled the chamber, and the overhead lights dimmed just enough for the glow of the screen to take command. The first image appeared. A young U.S. soldier of Mexican heritage, smiling in his crisp dress uniform. The date of his death in Afghanistan glinted in small type beneath his name. In the gallery, a veteran straightened in his seat, shoulders squaring. Another veteran's lips pressed into a hard line, as if holding back words that might cut the air in two. The slide dissolved into the second. A black nurse from Houston, eyes rimmed with exhaustion above her mask, holding the hand of a COVID patient in a sterile ICU room. The tubes, the monitors, the weight of the moment. It was all there in the photograph. But somewhere near the back, someone exhaled slowly, a sound that was half sigh, half surrender. Then came the third, a grainy black and white shot from Dallas, 1965. An elderly Asian American woman, her wrists locked in steel cuffs, standing between two uniformed officers. She held her chin high, even as they led her away. The room reacted in fragments. A gasp here, a muted sniffle there, until the sound merged into a thick, quiet tension. Jasmine let the images linger, refusing to rush. They stared back at the senators, the aides, the cameras, each one a piece of Texas history too often left out of the story. Stepping forward, she gripped the microphone. Her voice was calm, but it carried like a strike. "Which one?" she asked, eyes never leaving Vance. "Should I tell to get out of Texas?" The screen still glowed with the last image when the cameras cut to JD Vance. His jaw had tightened into a hard line, and for the first time all morning, his eyes broke away. Just a flicker, but enough for millions watching to see. He shifted in his seat, the confident ease from earlier replaced by something heavier, something he couldn't quite mask. Jasmine's voice cut through the stillness, steady and resonant. These are Texans. These are Americans. And no one has the right to erase them. The words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. They carried like a hammer striking glass, each syllable sharp enough to leave a mark. Up in the gallery, Reverend Elijah Brown clasped his hands together, head bowing ever so slightly. "Amen," he whispered, the single word landing like a seal on what had just been said. Beside him, a young activist bit her lip, eyes glistening. In the press box, Linda McCarthy was already hammering at her keyboard, her eyes darting between the screen and Jasmine. She knew a viral moment when she saw one, and this wasn't just viral. It was combustible. The tweet forming in her draft was about to detonate across timelines. Jasmine didn't look away from Vance. Her gaze was locked, unblinking, the way a trial lawyer stares at a witness she knows is about to crack. The room felt smaller, tighter, every heartbeat sinking to hers. And just when it seemed she might let the moment rest, she leaned in. And then she went for the jugular. Jasmine didn't blink. She let the silence hold for just a second longer, then turned away from JD Vance and faced the row of cameras. Her eyes locked on the lens as if she were speaking directly to every living room, every phone screen, every heart tuned in. "If you believe America is only for people who look like you," she said, her voice steady but charged, "you don't believe in America at all." The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended, before breaking like a wave. Social media caught it instantly. Hashtags lit up, timelines flooded. "Honor, we are America," Crockett and Vance. "This is Texas" began trending before she'd even stepped back from the microphone. News producers in glass booths waved frantically at their crews, mouthing, "We've got it. Run it now." In the hearing room, the thin line of decorum snapped. A ripple of clapping started in the gallery, then grew, swelling into something undeniable. Activists rose to their feet. A veteran slapped his palm against the wooden railing, the sound echoing like a gavel of its own. Even a few staffers, caught up in the current, forgot themselves and joined in. Vance sat motionless, but his knuckles whitened out where his hands gripped the desk. The cameras were still on him, capturing every flicker of his expression. He knew the clip was already out in the world, slipping beyond his control. And for a man like JD Vance, that was a dangerous place to be. Vance wasn't done, and the next move he made would decide who owned the room. The applause was still rolling through the chamber when Vance's patience finally snapped. He slammed his palm against the desk, hard. The crack against the polished wood rang out like a gunshot, bouncing off the marble walls and slicing through the noise. "Who? This is political theater," he barked, his voice sharp and raw. "And you're the actress." A cluster of his supporters in the gallery roared in approval, the sound sharp and jagged. Some clapped, others whistled, and a few leaned over the railing, nodding and pointing like this was a show they had paid to see. But they weren't alone. Across the room, boos surged back like a counterwave, swelling until it threatened to drown out everything else. Security staff stiffened, scanning the crowd, ready for whatever might come next. Through it all, Jasmine didn't flinch. She stayed rooted where she was, her posture tall and balanced, as if the floor beneath her had been nailed solid. That half smile on her lips wasn't arrogance. It was control. It was the expression of someone who'd seen this move before, in courtrooms and debates, and knew exactly how to flip it back on her opponent. Vance's eyes narrowed. He had thrown the punch to rattle her, to force a misstep, but she didn't give him one. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him like a surgeon sizing up the precise cut to make. Her hands rested lightly on the table, fingers still, but her gaze never wavered. The noise in the gallery ebbed into an uneasy hush, like the moment before a thunderclap. Even the reporters leaned forward, sensing they were seconds away from the next viral clip. Vance leaned back, lips pressed into a tight line, waiting for her to defend herself, to say something that would finally give him the upper hand. But Jasmine didn't rush. Hemmum. She let the tension stretch, owning the silence, knowing the cameras were still locked on her face. And then it became obvious to everyone watching. He had just given her the perfect opening. Jasmine let the silence breathe just long enough for the room to lean in. Then, without raising her voice, she struck. "If defending Texans is theater," she said, each word crisp as glass breaking, "then I'll keep performing until every voice is heard." She didn't give Vance a chance to respond. She started naming names. Not statistics, not faceless numbers, but real people he had failed. The wheat farmer in West Texas, whose irrigation grant was denied. The Marine veteran in El Paso still waiting for the benefits he was promised. Nani, the single mother in Dallas, juggling 3 jobs while her state aid application sat on his desk, untouched. Each name landed like a blow, pulling the air tighter in the chamber. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in, hungry for every detail. The more she spoke, the more Vance's jaw locked, the rhythm of her words hammering away at the image he'd built for himself. Then something happened that nobody could have scripted. In the gallery, one veteran rose to his feet, spine straight, hand raised in a crisp salute. Another followed, and another, until a whole row of them stood, silent but unshakable, honoring the woman speaking truth to power. The sound in the room changed. No cheers, no boos, just the hum of a moment too raw to interrupt. Jasmine stood steady, letting their salute speak louder than anything she could add. And then, the unthinkable happened on live TV. The veterans were still on their feet when the monitors in the press box lit up red. NBC's feed cut to a breaking news banner, running live poll numbers in bold across the screen. Public sympathy for Jasmine Crockett had spiked to staggering levels. A wave so sudden it looked less like opinion and more like a reckoning. Vance's staff noticed it too. From the row behind him, aides began hammering their phones, fingers moving in frantic bursts. Messages flew to media allies, talking points scrambled, damage control plans drafted in real time. But it was like trying to stop a dam from breaking with bare hands. Down at the witness table, Jasmine moved with a calm that cut sharper than any outburst. Funny, she gathered her notes slowly, stacking the papers with deliberate precision, as though she had all the time in the world. The applause, the salutes, the trending hashtags, none of it pulled her off balance. Vance stole a glance toward the cameras, but the lenses were no longer hunting for him. Swanily, they were locked on her, the woman who had just flipped the script on live television. The room felt different now, the air heavy with the sense that something had shifted, maybe for good. This moment had lit the fuse. Now the question was whether America would let it burn or snuff it out. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the numbers were staggering. Jasmine's speech had rocketed past 50 million views online, tearing through every social platform like a wildfire. News outlets replayed the clip on a loop, each broadcast framed as the moment that shook the Senate. Across the country, people were leaving their living rooms and stepping into the streets. In Dallas, a small group gathered outside the old courthouse, holding handmade signs. "We are Texas too." In Chicago, hundreds rallied downtown, their chants echoing against the glass towers. In rural towns, farmers lined up their trucks along the main roads, flags snapping in the wind. The footage pouring in was as diverse as the nation itself. Veterans in uniform saluting her words. Nurses standing shoulder to shoulder outside hospitals, masks still on, raising their fists in quiet solidarity. Community leaders speaking at church steps, school gyms, and public squares, each echoing the same conviction. That what happened in that hearing room wasn't just about politics, it was about who gets to belong. It was more than support, it was momentum. Every clip, every rally, every voice added to the swell until it felt like the country itself was leaning towards something new. And yet amid all the noise, one message rose above them all. The Texas sun was low and warm when Jasmine stepped through the gates of the small cemetery. The crunch of gravel under her shoes was the only sound as she made her way to a weathered headstone marked with her grandmother's name. She knelt, pulling a small Texas flag from her bag, and pressed it gently into the soil. For a long moment, she just stayed there, one hand resting on the stone, eyes closed. Then she leaned forward and whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. We're still fighting, Grandma. And we're winning. A faint breeze lifted the edge of her hair, carrying her words into the open field beyond. From the road, the sound of children's laughter drifted in. Jasmine turned to see a small group of kids gathered by the fence, their hands clutching homemade signs in bright marker. We are Texas, too. The letters weren't perfect, but the message was, one little girl, missing her 2 front teeth, waved shyly before lifting her sign higher. The camera would catch it all. The sunlight on the flag, the kids' determined faces, the way Jasmine's eyes softened but stayed strong. This wasn't just about one woman standing her ground in Washington anymore. Her fight had become their fight. When Jasmine returned to Congress, the chamber was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Every seat was filled, but the usual shuffle of papers and side conversations was gone. She stepped to the microphone, her gaze sweeping the room, not to intimidate, but to make sure no one could pretend they hadn't heard her. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of every story she had told, every face she had shown. Justice is not charity, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. It is the debt we owe to one another as Americans. The words didn't just echo off the walls. They seemed to settle in the air, heavy enough to make the moment feel unshakable. There was a pause as if the room itself needed to absorb it, then a single clap, another. And soon the sound grew, rolling into full applause that filled the chamber. Some stood, others didn't, but no one could deny the shift that had taken place. As the screen faded to black, the sound of applause lingered, not fading out too quickly, letting the weight of it hang with the audience watching at home. On-screen text appeared. Share this story if you believe every American has the right to call this land home. Somewhere in the noise of that applause was a truth older than politics and louder than division. When one voice speaks with courage, it gives others permission to stand. And the question now hung in the air. Who would be next to rise? Holding your gaze in the face of attack and turning silence into the power to reclaim the voices of the forgotten? That is how you change the course of events. The values that define Texas and a fair America are not built on the dominance of the strong, but on the courage of those who dare to speak for the silent majority. If it were you and the whole room was holding its breath, would you bow your head or would you speak? If this moment struck a chord, don't just watch and move on. Like, share, and spread this story so every voice, no matter how small, is heard. Hit subscribe and tap the bell, because the next fight for what's right might be yours.